Hello, everyone, and welcome to Frontiers, exploring the world of data. Frontiers dives into how people are using their data science minds to shape organizations and change the landscape outside of big tech. In each episode, we explore the far-reaching corners of the world of data. My name is Jazmin, and I'm your host for this series. I myself am passionate about empowering people to make data-driven decisions, and I'm always amazed at how others do it every day. Today, we are exploring the land of limited resources, how to enable data-driven changes when you have limited resources at your disposal. And that leads us to introducing our guest for today, Emma Gibson. I am fortunate enough to personally know Emma. I first met her when we studied operations research at MIT. I punched out after 2 years with my master's, but she pushed through and persevered to get her PhD. She is a brilliant mind and has focused on working in data, analytics, and technology projects in resource-limited settings, not just in the US, but around the globe. She's currently an engagement lead at Business Science Corporation in the UK, where she has quite a breadth of responsibilities, as we all know, and especially her official job titles only go so far. But we'll cover more of her background as we go along. So with that, I want to say thank you so much for being here today, Emma. It is such a pleasure, and I am so excited for our discussion.
Lovely to be here. Thank you.
All right, so I wanted to start off with an icebreaker question that is like tangentially related, arguably related to our topic of discussion when we talk about limited resource environments. So the question is, if you found yourself in a situation where you had limited resources at your disposal, or you just had limited resource environment, say hypothetically a zombie apocalypse, what are 5 things that would be in your grab bag or your to-go bag? I guess I'll just put mine out there first. I would have a bat for self-defense, because you never know. You need have something hard. Spam for food, obviously. Water, because I think that's just a given. I would also have rope, because I feel like rope's one of those things where like you don't really think you need it until you need it. So rope, I don't know what I need it for, but I'm sure when I need it, it'll be really handy. And then Google Translate, I would say would be the last thing. So that's like my phone and my solar power charger. I'm going to include that as one item, because you can put a solar power charger like on the case of a phone. So yeah, I think it'd be really valuable to be able to translate to different languages in that sort of situation. So those are 5 of the things I would have.
Okay. Well, I'm glad we've dealt with the counting multiple items as one issue,
Okay.
because I think my starting point is a first aid kit, which is arguably probably unfairly broad. But yeah, I realize I'm quite severely deficient in my understanding of how a zombie apocalypse would work. But one thing I've gotten very good at over the last few years is intercontinental travel. 10 plus hour flights followed by several trains and or buses and or taxis to get to a destination. So I have a pretty good go bag already, which is my plane bag that I only ever have on me when I go on an aeroplane and when I'm traveling somewhere. So yeah, definitely first aid kit, assorted band-aids, bandages, painkillers would be probably top of that list. Next on the list wouldn't be in the bag, but it would be with me, would be really sturdy, comfortable, waterproof shoes.
Ooh.
An absolute must-have. Next would probably be just a really unreasonable quantity of probably very unhealthy snacks.
Okay, this is a lot of items. Okay, categories. All right, here I understand categories. But snacks, I agree.
Snacks,
essential.
I'm kind of assuming in a zombie apocalypse, probably we'd lose Google. So I was thinking like offline maps, which is a thing in airports, right? When you haven't got your SIM card sorted out and your phone's not working and you can't get onto the Wi-Fi. So like some kind of offline maps, a way to navigate myself. I don't actually have like an atlas or a map book or anything, but I would have to find one. My last item, yeah, probably a water bottle. Always a good idea. Probably shouldn't be an afterthought either, but yeah.
Yeah. That was like the last thing in your list.
Shows you my priorities.
Well, that's very like well thought out. Like I guess all your travels have really prepped you for this scenario where no self-defense. It's all just like pure survival. So I'm assuming you're going to just avoid the really populated areas and just try to like go into a safe haven somewhere.
Yeah, I am very clumsy, hence the need for very sturdy shoes. And I don't think I'm winning any sort of self-defense battles. But maybe if I have a first aid kit, I can like pair up with someone who can do the defense bit, and I can just do the like trying to keep them alive bit.
All right, we'll pair up because we don't have much overlap in our items. Well, thank you very much for entertaining that question. So I want to move to the topic of discussion today. This is a good warm-up into just a very relevant warm-up. So we're here to talk about how you lean on and leverage your inner data scientist to drive change in resource-limited settings. So you have worked in these sorts of environments for a number of years now, and I was wondering if you could first define what resource limited settings is. Like, what does it mean to you? Like, what do those environments look like for you? And then speak a little bit about how you got into this arena in the first place.
Yeah, sure. So I mean, resource limited is a very broad and general term that for me means something fairly specific, and that's sub-Saharan Africa. I'm from South Africa, so it's the place I grew up, and it's really a place full of possibilities, but also a lot of needs that aren't being met. And I think there's a lot of commonality across most developing countries. You'll see similar sorts of healthcare challenges that need to be addressed there that are not the same as what you would find in the US or Europe or sort of really well-developed healthcare systems. So I think really the key there is it's a place where there's both a lot going wrong in terms of needs not being met, but also a lot of development. Things are growing. Really the types of problems I like to solve are the ones where you create something new that wasn't there before. So you're not just sort of optimizing, rearranging, moving things around a little bit. You're really meeting a need that couldn't be met before. And I mean, I think in hindsight, it sort of comes out as a nice story as to how I ended up doing this. But when I think about what got me here eventually, I think growing up in South Africa, there was the first democratic elections in my lifetime. Okay, I don't remember it. I was a bit small at that point, but there was a sense of massive inequalities and massive needs that need to be addressed, but also change that was happening. There's also a great awareness of the fact that I went to a good school, I got a good education. That there's a lot of people who just don't have that. And a frustration that why don't they have that? Now decades and decades of racial segregation and unfair social systems, you don't undo those in 10 years or even in one generation. That's something society is going to be grappling with for a long time to come. But the idea that we need to do something about that was really key. And I think the last thing was the HIV/AIDS epidemic. When that hit so hard in sub-Saharan Africa, it's kind of scary as a kid. It was sort of a little bit like living through COVID, or what I imagine it was like to live through COVID if you were a young kid and didn't really understand any of this, and you were sort of just hearing that a lot of people were dying and worried that this was going to be your friends and your family. And so I think there's sort of a catharsis there in being an adult and being able to look at these problems from a more sort of holistic kind of systemic perspective and think, I'm not a doctor, but what can I do? What can I contribute to that? So it's a very, very, very challenging, also very exciting space to be.
Yeah, so it seems like you're really, as you're growing up and you've been around these sorts of issues, and you've seen what's going on in the world, and you have that perspective. That's really what seemed to inspire you to go into these areas. I'm curious if that changed. Did that change at all as you grew up, as you got older, or has it your motivation for being in this field kind of stayed the same throughout your life?
I mean, I definitely wouldn't claim that I had a dream and then I made it happen. It's all constantly evolving. These are all little pieces that we pull together into a story we tell ourselves that gives our life meaning. But I think those are the main pieces, and most certainly, it's evolving. I think when I started off, I studied applied maths and statistics. So I wanted to build the models, and I wanted to test the models. And that's really great, and I still really like that. But I found myself over the years slipping more and more into get the data. There's lots of people who can build models, but in the places in the world where we need these models the most, there's no data. And a lot of people sort of stop there, and that's completely reasonable. If you're a data scientist and there's no data, get out. What are you doing? But I found a lot of satisfaction in that. It's taken me way out of my comfort zone. I didn't see myself building apps to collect data, but here I am. So I think it's a new perspective that you can solve the problem at many levels, and many people have to contribute to solving these problems. And I've sort of found a niche where I feel like there's not enough people looking there. There's a lot of potential if we can get the data, but getting it is a big step, and that's my current challenge. But I hope it will continue to evolve. Learning new things, trying new things is always a good way to go about it.
Yeah, it seems like the constant, where's the data? Can we get the data? Is there enough data? Like, do we have data? That seems to be a question that a lot of data scientists end up, asking themselves at one point in a project, hopefully earlier than not. But when it comes to your current work, can you speak a little bit to, what are you currently working on, or some of the projects that are most projects or topics that have been most exciting for you in your journey so far?
Yeah, I mean, always happy to talk about what I'm working on at the moment. It's been a really phenomenal opportunity of a whole lot of things coming together at the right time. So, in sort of summary, we're trying to build electronic medical record systems for the third largest hospital in the world. This is a hospital that happens to be, in South Africa, quite near to where I grew up. Despite being the third largest hospital in the world, it is nowhere on the list of the best resourced hospitals in the world. But this hospital called Chris Hani Baragwanath Academic Hospital, it's an absolutely phenomenal place. It offers sort of the highest level of care that you can get in a South African healthcare facility, which means they get all the most complicated, rare, tricky cases. It's got far too little equipment, far too few staff, far too little funding for the magnitude of the need that it serves. Not only people in South Africa, but people travel from other countries in Africa to get the kind of healthcare there that's just not available to them otherwise. It's a scenario where everyone's doing the best with what they have, and so data and digitizing information is just not a priority when you're trying to first save lives, and that is a huge loss because of the scope of the work that they do, the complexity, the rarity of the cases that they handle, and just in general the massive lack of data in the healthcare space on African populations. The potential there, if that data can be used and harnessed for good, is massive. And the hospital itself is staffed with, it's an academic hospital. So it's not only where doctors are taught, but it's where doctors will do research. It's where the great minds are sort of gathered. So there's just massive potential in terms of the good that can be done. Not just in terms of patient care and making sure that the right information is available when it's needed and that tests aren't repeated because the results were printed and misplaced and so on. But setting standards for what we want healthcare to look like in an African context and how to do it better. So into this whole sort of perfect storm came a guy called Robbie Rosen, who's the founder of Nando's. I know it's not that popular in the US, but certainly in South Africa and the UK, Nando's is a very well-known name. But he's a really inspiring guy who's been involved in a lot of philanthropy in the healthcare space in sub-Saharan Africa. And he sort of galvanized this coalition. The organization I work with is part of it. The University of the Witwatersrand, which is the major medical school associated with the hospital, is part of it. Sort of coming together and saying, let's tackle this. Let's try and do digitization of data at Chris Hani Baragwanath Academic Hospital. And so we started off in the pediatric surgery department, which is a little but very significant chunk. And we're growing from there. We're sort of working day to day, like in depth with clinicians, really understanding their needs, trying to co-design with them a solution that can actually work in the very difficult context that they sort of exist in day to day. And that, can ultimately not only make things better for patients, make patient care better, but also give them the ability to do the kind of research they need to improve things in the long run.
Yeah, when you were first talking about, third largest, I was like, the fact that it's so under-resourced, I was just astounded. It just seems like such a big challenge. Like the entirety of what you're trying to tackle is huge. I'm curious because of the arena that you're in. It's a very unique arena. I was wondering, what is it about these problems? I mean, you talked about obviously like resource limited, but can you speak more about like what resources are limited? Can you speak more detail on what it is about your environment that you're in that just makes it so unique from like other hospitals, other than the scale and magnitude and the general lack of resources?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's this unique combination of extreme need and extreme potential. It's a situation where simply just scaling up healthcare requires a lot of resources. It requires a lot of money. It requires a lot of doctors. These things are hard to come by. They don't appear out of thin air, and in developing countries in particular, it's extremely difficult. But to give you some examples, this hospital consists of over 400 different buildings, and it's sprung up as a campus more than a hospital. Bits have been added on, and at any given point in time, a large number of these buildings will be undergoing some kind of renovation or improvement. But the doctors are wheeling patients in beds between the buildings and holding an umbrella over the bed when they have to walk through an area that's uncovered, just because if there's money to be invested, investing it in fixing the essential equipment that's keeping patients alive is more important than fixing other things that are sort of nice to haves. In terms of staffing, the hours that these doctors work, the patients that they see, the load of work that they have is sort of unprecedented. And it's really a place where, it attracts people who are willing to go that extra mile. The circumstances are so difficult that the people who are there, have to make a very clear decision about their attitude to it, that they have to see the opportunities. They have to be willing to sort of give it their everything. And so, I think it's really great to see what that brings out in people. That, these are doctors who are doing, maybe 15, 20 surgeries in a day, potentially, and they're going home and they're filling out the paperwork and they're capturing the data in bed with a cup of tea because they don't have administrative staff. They don't have computers in the hospital to capture this data while they work. So just the scope of it is quite overwhelming. But the potential that you can see there, if we just had this, if we just changed a few things, the opportunities that opens is mind blowing.
Yeah, and when you're talking about the the opportunities and the potential. I'm curious how your background and the uh, the data-minded person that you are, how does that play into your current role and how you shape or mold or move your organization in a particular direction?
Yeah, so I think, when you're talking about collecting data in these kinds of settings, you've got to do it with a purpose, right? Nobody has time to let's just capture everything, and maybe in 10 years' time, some PhD student will come and write a paper on it. Like if it's not useful, it doesn't get done. They do not have the bandwidth to do things that are just maybe nice to have. So I think coming in with an operations research mindset is hugely valuable. If you look at data information and you're immediately thinking, what problems could this solve? What questions could this answer? What are the pitfalls? What are the concerns? What are the assumptions that we're going to have to make? Getting that baked into the data collection process, being able to sort of see that through from start to finish is incredibly valuable. Making sure that with the very limited resources that you've got, you're targeting them appropriately, just in terms of your data collection. So I think that's been really huge. And there's also a problem solving element to it. Knowing the right questions to ask, knowing how to interrogate a problem, to sort of extract the key elements, not accepting that will never work. Why will it never work? What do we need to change? What assumptions do we need to challenge there? I think those are all skills that you absolutely learn when you do mathematical modeling, when you do data science, that you can apply in this context to great benefit.
Yeah, so there's this mix of not just hard skills, but also these soft skills that are hugely valuable. I imagine in environments that you're working in, there is a lot. There could be a lot of tension. There could be a lot of passionate conversations that happen. People are very dedicated to what their work to their field. And when we talk about the skills that are useful, I'm curious if there's are there a mix of soft skills or certain types of skills that you were able to maybe you learned a little bit of or you knew of when you were studying or before you got into this role, but now that you're working day to day at the hospital or working in this environment with these sorts of individuals, are there certain skills that you really had to hone in on and really improve since you've started working in this arena?
Yeah, so I think learning that it's okay to feel like an idiot sometimes, which happens a lot of the time when you're hanging around with doctors and you understand maybe one in two words that they say, and it's overwhelming sometimes how much time these people have spent studying and the amount of knowledge that is contained in their head that they just they can just call it up at a minute's notice. So going from a sort of academic environment or a sort of coding environment where you do things at your own pace and you learn things and you read the documentation, learning how to sort of slot in to a completely unfamiliar context and be comfortable with that, be sort of comfortable with what you don't know and know the right questions to ask, the right people to talk to, the way to sort of grapple enough with their context to turn it into something that you can reasonably engage with. And I think that's always stood out to me as finding the right people. People have different skills in every team. There's going to be the mommy of the team who likes to sort other people out and make sure that everyone's taken care of and everyone's keeping up. And there's going to be the leader who's got new ideas and wants to do bold things and so on. And so, finding how to identify those people within teams, getting to the people that you really know will engage with a problem, will help you get to the heart of it, will give you the kind of sort of thoughtful feedback that you need is an incredibly valuable skill. And sort of based on anecdotal experience, a really good approach that I found is to ask whoever's managing the team, who's the person that complains the most? Who's the troublemaker? Who's the person who keeps trying to shake things up and change them? Because often, these are the people with both the ideas and also the passion to put into it, who are sort of strongly motivated to improve where things could be improved. So I think that's an ongoing process. Each time you work with a new team, you learn something new from them. You meet new people, and they teach you things about their context, and also about how you can do a better job of really understanding problems that are completely unfamiliar to you when you start.
I almost feel like there's like it's a different, there are different like levels of how much an individual will use their like user empathy skills. And I feel like in your situations, because you're working in such complex environments, there's so many stakeholders, there's so many people involved. You have to exercise a lot of patience, but you also are constantly putting yourself in other folks' shoes, seeing what is their perspective, trying to understand it from their perspective. Because I think as data scientists, or people that are very much think of data when you're in these industries that are not as data or technology native, you find that you're the outsider coming in of sorts. People are not always the most welcoming of you. There are some people that are skeptical of what impact you can provide. So I imagine you've had quite a few of those sorts of experiences where you have to kind of win people over in a sense, or really get them to see your way of things. But there's also this, you have to sit back as well and take some time to understand it from their point of view. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, you've summarized it really well. I think I'm always, in awe of the work that these doctors do. And I feel the pressure as well. When we have a session where we need to sit down with them, we need to get feedback, find out what's working, what's not working. They've got a theater list. They've got 10 patients, 10 kids who they need to operate on that day, who are waiting. If our discussion runs half hour over, there are patients whose surgeries might be delayed. There are patients whose surgeries might need to be canceled. If there's a bug or a problem and they have to spend 15 minutes talking to me on the phone, that's 15 minutes less sleep they're getting, or 15 minutes less that they're spending with a patient. And that really puts things in perspective. Like, if I think my job is stressful, that is another level entirely. So, so especially in the medical setting where you're dealing with people whose decisions save lives, it's, you have to be so aware of that. And I think the trust is a big thing. As a doctor, when you've got so much responsibility on your shoulders, allowing someone else to sort of come in and try and change the way you do things, try and change the way you work, especially someone who is not a medical doctor, letting them in that way is a big ask. And I think, the whole approach that we've tried to take with this project is really to honor the clinicians' workflows. So to go into their context and get a detailed understanding of what they need and build something that is specifically tailored to that, rather than doing a lot of research on international best practices in healthcare data systems and then building a system and showing them how to use it. And so, when I started this project, my sort of baptism by fire was I joined them at 5:30 a.m. before their morning rounds. They put me in a set of scrubs and they took me to every location that they work in this massive hospital of how many hundred buildings. And I think my Fitbit was really happy that day. I got in far more steps than I would do on any normal day. But the being so close to it, being let in that way was phenomenal. I don't think I could have gotten an understanding of the complexity of their work any other way. And also the reality of it, that every minute of the day, there's really sick kids who these doctors are trying to help, and every decision that they make, every event that occurs throughout the day has the potential to contribute to that in one way or another. So, I've learned from that experience that I'm really glad I didn't go into medicine. I didn't faint at the sight of blood or anything, but I'm in awe of the emotional stamina that it takes to do that day in, day out. And also of the fact that there are all of these doctors who work under such challenging circumstances and then go home at the end of the day and think about how to make it better. And invest more energy in thinking about the bigger picture, which is it's just such a phenomenal thing to see in that context.
Yeah, it's a completely different environment than if you're just surrounded by a bunch of fellow researchers and you're in a lab and you're working on a project. The fact that you have to interact with so many other people allows for a lot of new cool experiences and really impactful experiences, and can really shape how you personally see the world for the better. I'm wondering now, when it comes to these environments, these resource limited environments that you find yourself in, are there good, like, positives? I know there's a lot of challenges. I know obviously we talked about how impactful it is and how much you can get personally from it. But in terms of actually working on the project and the technology aspect of it, are there things that are maybe easier, or things that were surprising to you when it comes to try to implementing some of these solutions or proposed solutions in these environments?
I mean, the biggest and most obvious one is that there's such huge potential for impact. That getting the scope of the improvement that's needed is huge, and getting that improvement can change so many things. So that's a huge draw, obviously. There's also there's the fact that it's a very sort of developing, dynamic environment. So I think, although you're severely constrained in the resources that you have, and that can be a huge barrier sometimes, you also have a lot less inertia in terms of legacy systems and the way we've always done things. And I think this is a trend that I've seen in my time living in various different places in the world, that I was quite shocked when I got to the US in 2016 and realized that people were still sending checks in the mail. Because I remember that South Africa phased out checks when I was a kid. Like it was just seen as a really weird and inefficient way to do things. Like, you just log into your online banking and you just type in the account details and then you send them the money. But when I got to the US in 2016, there was no option to pay my rent that way. It was, you can write a check and you can send it in the mail. So, that's one example of being sort of a late adopter. That if you're doing something that other places have already done in many different ways, you learn from that experience, right? You get to take advantage of sort of new and exciting things without having to deal with all of the inertia that comes with the sort of older or sort of first attempts at these systems. And I think that that's huge in terms of mobile technologies. In sub-Saharan Africa, particularly, we spent a lot of time working with doctors at Barra Pediatric Surgery, trying to decide what kind of user interface we were going to build for this system, and we tried to go in with absolutely no preconceived ideas about what this should be, and the conclusion we came to is it's got to be an app. They're constantly walking from building to building. We can't put computers in all of these buildings. Who's gonna maintain them? And the doctors are constantly on their phones. This is how they stay in contact. If something goes wrong, they have to have their phone with them. So, I think that would be probably quite a big ask if you went to a major hospital in the US and said, you know what, from now on we're going to do all our data stuff with phones. And but it was just sort of the logical step in this context. And so I think mobile technology in general is so accessible, so ubiquitous, and there's really, really exciting opportunities there. And we're getting straight to that in the work I've been doing, which, again, didn't see myself as a mobile dev, but it's really exciting to be working with a team who's doing that and seeing, hey, we can make an app and it's a really useful app. So yeah, I think, with the challenges, there are these silver linings that make it a really exciting place to be.
Yeah, just to be able to jump in and kind of think mobile first, think of what's the most lightweight way that you can. I think that also bleeds into this thought of being agile in a sense, in being, just showing, what is the minimum viable product that we can provide to you that would be that would provide the most value with the least amount of investment just to get something to you faster. The thought of folks just signing up for mobile applications in the hospitals here in the U.S. is just like, oh, it seems like there'd be a lot of need to convince them of the need for that. But with the work that you're doing, you're able to, there is no precedence, and you can define what that first step looks like, and that's really exciting. But there's also a lot of responsibility there, which I'm sure you feel you feel every day.
Yeah.
Looking at looking at the future of this field, I'm wondering what your thoughts are regarding people that are working in this similar environments as you. What do you see that your area of work growing? You see more people getting involved? Do you see a lot more momentum and funding in these areas? Or are you seeing the opposite? What do you think is the future trajectory of this area of work?
I definitely think it's going to grow. I think COVID galvanized a lot of that. COVID forced a lot of people to do things virtually that they wouldn't have otherwise. And I think that will take some time to sort of sink in at a much deeper level, at a policy level, at a planning level. But it's sort of unavoidable that once you've taken those first steps into doing things digitally, you don't go back. You once you have the convenience of being able to video call or do WhatsApp or whatever it is, whatever tool was available to you in the moment, it's very hard to think actually we should do all of this in person, and we should print out all of these things, and so on. So I think it's, the seeds are there. And I think doing it right is the bigger question. Are we gonna do it properly? Are we gonna do it sustainably? Because we're gonna do it. It's happening. It's inevitable. But making sure that we're doing it in a way that sort of sets us up for future success, and minimizes future risks and problems is the key. And I think there is definitely a lot of movement in this space. There's a whole lot of new sort of medical technologies that are becoming accessible, and with those there's a greater interest in research and in data, and so it's sort of coming from all sides. There's patients who want access to their data, and then there's the people developing the blood tests or the new cancer treatment who really need that data to be able to do their research. So I think pulling all of these things together in the right way is really key, and there are definitely conflicts. The simplest one is really making sure that everything you do is good for the patient. That someone's healthcare and someone's data should never be used in a way that doesn't benefit them. And making sure that all of those decisions are sort of firmly grounded in that principle. But yeah, I definitely think we're not going back. We're only going forward. And I think as time goes on, there are going to be a lot more people sort of asking good questions about, are we going forward in the right way? What is the best way to go forward? And I'm really, really happy to be there to hear that.
Yeah, the momentum that this already has, I can see it already continuing. I mean, people are obviously becoming more and more digitally savvy. People are growing up already in this digital age, and they are expecting these tools to already be available. And with that expectation just comes the products and the delivery of these sorts of tools and capabilities to them. But like you said, the most important thing is to make sure that we have the right people that are building these things, and we have the right mindset. I think, especially in this field that's so sensitive, and there's such a, you have so much responsibility. It's important to have the right people building these products and creating change in these organizations. do you have advice? I'm sure people that are listening in are very interested in like working in these sorts of fields where you don't have, everything you'd like and you could possibly ask for at your disposal, but you have to try to figure out how to make it work, how to figure out uh, how to make impact when you're not given much. What advice do you have for folks that are interested in these fields?
I think the one is to be grounded in reality and sort of the practical reality of your situation and what you want to achieve. Having a very clear idea of why you're doing what you're doing and how it's valuable to you, and that's going to be different for every individual. But that helps because it is tough. You need something to get you through the tough times. You are going to have to make sacrifices at some point. If you want to do something that's really, really meaningful, it's probably not going to be super easy. So I think being really grounded in that is key, and that's about you personally. That's not really something that you get from someone else. I think having the right collaborators is the other key thing. That really, if you want to solve complex problems where there's not a lot of information available, where there's a great need, you need champions of that solution who understand the context, who live in it, who deal with it every day. So anytime that you sort of find yourself making assumptions, there should be someone who checks those assumptions. There should be someone who sort of informs the way you move forward, and knowing how to connect with those people and find those people is hugely valuable, and they make all the difference. And then I think the other part of it is treating it as a journey. That there's always setbacks, and you don't start from point A and go directly towards point B with single-minded determination and constant focus. It's okay to question things. It's okay to take detours. It's okay to make mistakes. Ultimately, that's how you find where you need to be. Being sort of open to new opportunities that might arise, and sort of ready to rethink at the appropriate times.
Yeah, when it's not a straight line, you become open to like learning new things. You like explore new frontiers. I love it. I love everything that you said. It is the complexity and the unexpectedness of this field are what make it exciting, but also it is important to know really what that means. I mean, it is a profession. It's a field. It's a field of work, and the opportunities are real, and the opportunities can be immense, but there's also a lot that comes with it that you also need to make sure that you keep an awareness of. And yeah, I love the idea that things are not straight lines. You have to go in, around, and about, but that's where you learn the most, and that's are the most exciting journeys. So thank you for that. So as we actually near the end of this episode, I wanted to close with like a short game of sorts that I have labeled fact or fiction. So I have a few statements here about working in resource limited settings. Not all of them are completely relevant, similar to our zombie apocalypse in the beginning of the episode. And I would like you to tell me if you think these statements are fact or fiction. And there's no expectation at all that you should actually know the answer to any of these, the truth, the ground truth of any of these. I just think it's a great exercise to just test your skills. So with that, the first one. So many nonprofits have to work under resource limited circumstances. Despite this challenge, there are around 10 million nonprofits worldwide. Is that fact or fiction?
Fact?
Yes, there are. Okay, so there are around 10 million nonprofits worldwide. I was surprised. I didn't think that number would be. Yeah. I was like, that's actually, when I saw 10, I was like, oh, that doesn't seem like a lot. But then million, I'm like, that's a lot. It's a lot. Fun fact, 15% of them tend to be in the US. I think the majority are in Asia. So just like in terms of distribution here. All right, second one. Let's talk about NGOs and charities. So, healthcare was the largest segment of the NGOs and charitable organizations market, accounting for about 55% of the total market in 2020. And you can talk us out too.
Yeah, like I'm going to say fiction because I don't think it's like 55% is a lot.
You're right. Oh my gosh, I'm surprised. I would not have. Yeah, you're right.
It
is
unexpectedly well.
Yeah, you're 2 for 2 right now. Yeah, so actually, healthcare is the fastest growing segment of the market, but trust and foundations are actually the largest segment. Then they make up 55%. So think of like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which is the largest one. Yeah. All right. Third one. Let's see. Rural areas around the globe generally have less access to resources when compared to urban areas. Currently, the rural population globally is around 44%.
Well, I know that the first sentence was true in terms of rural areas having less access to resources. That statement is at least 50% true. 44%, I'm going to say fiction.
It is a fact.
Oh, really? 44%?
Yes,
Wow.
the rural population globally is around 44%, and it's going to continue to decrease, I think, over the years. I think that's the prediction.
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, most are in rural, urban areas, which I was like surprised about too. I was like, wow, I didn't know that many are in like cities and whatnot.
Oh,
Yeah.
I would have thought it was the other. Like, I was thinking 44% sounds too high.
Oh, really?
I was thinking there's been so much urbanization. Like, doesn't it sound a bit like high for 44% of the population to be in areas classed as rural? That's so interesting. We clearly have different perspectives on this.
I'm in a city, so I just feel like, I'm just like, everyone should be here, right? Everyone's sitting here. It seems like everyone's here. Okay, 4. The nonprofit sector in the US employs about 11.9 million people, making it the country's third largest employer after retail and manufacturing.
Okay. I'm going to say fiction because I'm guessing maybe one of those statements is not true, but I have no idea which one. So I'm just hedging my bets there, really.
I like your thought process there. Actually, it's a fact.
Oh,
So
wow.
it is, yeah. So the nonprofit sector is the third largest employer, which I was like, wow, yeah, I was surprised about that too.
That is huge. Do you know where government ranks on that list in the US?
I don't know.
Okay, well, I mean, 11 point something million people is pretty big. So
yeah, because the nonprofit also includes like many hospitals are slated as nonprofit. So it's just, yeah, it's really big in the US. It's very broad. There's like, it covers a lot of ground.
Yeah.
All right. So you're 50-50. All right, the last one. Fresh water is a very limited resource, as you all know. That's not the question, and that's not the sentence in question.
That's true.
That's true. Today, only 3% of fresh water is in liquid form on the surface.
3% of fresh water is in liquid form on the surface. True? Fact?
It is fiction.
Okay. What is?
Only 0.3% of fresh water is in liquid form on the surface. Yeah. Yeah. So most fresh water exists in the form of ice, snow, and groundwater and soil moisture.
So, okay. I see. Okay.
Yeah. So only 0.3%. I was like, wow, that's so small of like fresh water, really?
Well, in my defense, I really try not to think about frozen things when I can. I come from a very warm climate, and we just sort of try to pretend that snow and sleet and ice don't exist for most of the year.
Okay,
wow,
fair. We'll give you that pass. The more you know, the more you know. So thank you, Emma, for being a worthy player. And thank you as well. Just thank you so much for being my guest. I have always admired the work you do and the dedication that you put to your craft. And I'm so grateful to be able to share your insights and thoughts with others. I mean, you are a natural explorer. even though you're even though you're like facing, these challenges every day, your impact is just so immense, and you're so dedicated to helping others, and like you're really not afraid to take these paths less traveled and just go right in and put in the hard work that needs to be done, because you see really the impact of what you're doing, and you see the potential that you can create. So I deeply appreciate you being here and taking your time to be with us here today.
No, thank you. It's been lovely to chat about this stuff, and I could chat about this forever. So really, really great to talk with like-minded people, and thank you for the opportunity.
I wanted to also thank Hatch IT for sponsoring this episode and allowing me to host these series. And lastly, I'd like to thank you, the listener, for tuning into this episode and exploring the world of data with us. Take care, everyone.